Hitesh, welcome. I'm super excited to have you here. You have always come across to me as somebody who really enjoys and kind of is fully immersed in what you're doing. We have worked together in the past, and I was thinking about that it would be awesome to have you on to share your experience, your journey, and kind of how you got here. So, welcome.
Thank you, Baiba. This pleasure is all mine. Always good to connect with you and enjoyed working our times together. So I'm happy to be here.
You have really impressive track record in leadership, deep technical acumen, including latest and greatest and most in-demand technologies, as well as you are a mentor. You also participate in charities and overall, how do you do it all? And what is your secret? Where do you get your energy?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I think, I'll give you kind of a story a little bit. So right out of my college, when I graduated from IIT Kanpur, I'm actually in Bangalore visiting, for a business trip. But right in Bangalore, I started my career with a company called Wipro. And a few months into the job, I was one of the first Java developers of Wipro. And I got to train like 50, 60 people on Java development. And a lot of these people were like really kind of senior mainframe developers, client server developers, and others. So I actually asked our leader and said, really, you expect me to train people that are way more experienced than me? And he said, you'll figure it out. And I actually learned the life's probably golden lesson, which is during that time, is teaching is the best way to learn. And so what I have actually enjoyed, I'm a learning driven person. Like I like to, whenever I am learning in my job, right? Like I was in IQVIA, I kind of joined a different domain. Whenever I'm learning, I really enjoy what I'm doing. And the second part of it is when I'm sharing information, I always enjoy it. So this is like a mentoring session or whatever you want to call it, in that sense. And I always say in interviews that when I do for jobs, right, whenever I'm interviewing somebody, I actually think of them as sort of semi-mentoring sessions. You're kind of learning from somebody, you're providing some insights. So I think just to stay grounded and always think as a growth mindset or a learning driven kind of culture, that is really what has kept me going. Is really kind of that hunger to learn, right? Yeah. Is really kind of like always there, and I'm still sort of learning every day, and kind of that's kind of what kept me updated with the coolest technologies in the world.
That's awesome. So you essentially early on recognize that it sounds like it's one of your core values.
That's right.
And so you incorporated it.
Exactly. And I actually think my mom and dad used to tell me, like in 12th grade, when, we have this exam called IIT, which is a kind of pretty hard exam to get in and get into a kind of one of the prestigious colleges. So I had to prepare a lot. And towards the later part of the preparation of that 12th grade year, what we call like a senior year in high school, I wasn't actually doing a lot of prep work. I was actually coaching some of my classmates who were having some tough times with math and stuff like that. And while my parents thought that I was teaching them and wasting time, I was actually learning, because by teaching them, I learned a lot more than learning myself. So I think some people think that sharing or knowledge sharing is a selfless thing. You kind of teach people and you are selfless in nature. I think it's as selfish as it can be, because you are, I think, teaching yourself a lot more about it than theirs. So I don't think it is, I don't think we need to put virtuous kind of cycle on top of it. I think it's all about just learning and sharing. And I think the more you learn and the more you share, the more you become enriched as a person. So that's really what I've learned. And that's what I practice sort of day in, day out.
I love it. First of all, that teaching is a selfish thing in the best way. And
that's right.
It's amazing how you connected those dots in high school.
That's right. Yeah. So I think I'm looking at it as, so I did that in high school, but I think in hindsight, I kind of roll back and say why that worked for me. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. So I think my lesson was learned in Wipro when I started teaching people Java development. But I kind of think of it as in how did I grow as a person? Like I always used to mentor and or not mentor, like teach kids or help people solve their problems in class, and I was good in math and science. So my parents used to tell me like you're wasting time on others, and I think and I enjoyed it because they were good friends, and we used to hang out together and stuff like that. But I think if I think about it in hindsight, right, I almost think like that added a lot to my growth, because that made me hungry for learning, and that sort of learning culture is what ingrained in me early on in my life.
I love it. So the person in Wipro, your boss in Wipro, early on, right? You're a recent grad, picking you to train 50 plus people. So it sounds like he recognized that also that leadership capability and aspect in
That's
you.
right. Yeah, meaning I think I wouldn't go as far as leadership, but I guess in some sense it is. We're senior individuals, gone through a lot of, engineering teaches a lot of things, in that sense. And he actually did it. We did it together. So in that sense, like he also worked with me. I built a lot of materials. We did the presentations together. I remember the nerves that I had in the first couple of sessions, and then it was like I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I'm just throwing code around and I'm just telling our people how to write code and, connect it with what they are familiar with. I knew a little bit about COBOL, which is the which is the language that they knew. I had learned it in high school. And so I was able to connect and contrast the two together. And then I did a lot of that going in. Like when I worked in my consulting company, I did a lot of training and coaching and, that sort of stuff, because that experience with me. And then I ended up, striking a very interesting thing. I ended up doing a co-authoring a project or a book on Java, and that was interesting. Like first time I submitted my chapter, all I got is red lines, right? And it's like I don't even know how to write anymore. And I'm like, I'm not an English guy, but I know how to write technical stuff. But that experience was also very interesting because that all told me the art of editing and like how do you write and how do you communicate to people. And that experience got me another full book project on .NET, and those kind of experiences. My book wasn't that popular or anything like that. I wasn't in the bestseller, but it's very learning experience for me. I got paid for it, but actually, in hindsight, I would have paid for it because I loved the experience, that sort of a thing. So that's what I think about
So
it.
how do it's obvious that you bring this energy and this enthusiasm and positivity when somebody would get down, like let's say if their book gets returned with all red, or be discouraged. But it seems like everything new that you take on, you have this enthusiastic attitude.
Yeah, I think you just have to have that drive. I'm in India. The word that is used in Hindi, and a lot of people who are of that audience will connect it. You have to have that bug or the kida in you, right? Like kida is essentially means bug, and you have to have that bug in you to kind of say, oh, I'm going to solve this problem. I want, like, you are not able to sleep till that happens. That sort of a thing. So till you have that drive and you kind of build on top of it, it doesn't matter, right? Whatever comes your way, you'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. Like I said, like I was saying earlier, it's not the destination that is important. It's the journey that matters. So I think that's sort of another aspect of this is like you are, it doesn't matter whether how you do there, you will get through it. You learn from your mistakes. Actually, I'll tell you something very cute, very cool. And hopefully the person that is watching this maybe seen this. So a learned person I met in Toronto recently told me something which I think is a lovely lesson in life. Is I always used to say, learn from your own mistakes, and you always, that is a common thing. But he said something very impressive, which I really enjoy, which is learn from the mistakes of others. You will never live to make them. You will never live enough to make them, which is very interesting, right? So you see something challenging, you see some issues, you build on top of it, and you sort of learn that, that growth mind test. I've read that book at some point of time in my life, and I think that sort of that sort of embodies perhaps the other thing, right? You want to keep that mind open, and you want to just figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, you display the growth mindset from, Java to now all the way to AI, right? Salesforce, you're
Yeah.
always on the cutting edge of the technology. So I think this is why it's so also cool to share your story. And I think others will pick up that energy too, because you just emanate it and it's contagious, and then it inspires
Thank you.
others to do it. So I think you're modeling it super well. So when did you get that bug? Like, let's go back to school when you're in middle school or high school. When did you get that bug or that relentless pursuit of solving technical and science problems?
Yeah, so I always loved science, I guess, since early age, right? So I grew up in the city of Taj Mahal, Agra, and I had a fortune, I had the fortune of going to a Catholic school for most of my young life. 12, 13 years in Catholic school, and they were, my teachers who were sisters, brothers, and fathers were really strict, and but I was one of their favorite students a lot of the times because I used to enjoy it, right? I never kind of resisted it in that sense. I really almost cherished that interaction, and courting like I will sometimes call the teacher's pet or something like that, and I actually took that as a almost like as a compliment rather than anything else, right? And in that scenario, but so I think it was early on. The science was there. You do some experiments, you always want to do something, so science was always kind of there. But let me kind of fast forward to computing. When we were young, I used to cycle to school, and on the way back there's this little shop that sells like groceries, very small shop, like literally, less than 50 square feet shop. And that was selling some groceries and stuff. They had a little TV, and they allowed us to play Mario's games for 1 rupee a game, right? And we used to go there. I used to get 2 rupees for a day from my grandfather, who used to give us for kind of pocket money, and then I would play sometimes those games. And one of the days I found out that this guy had a computer. I didn't even know that it was called a computer.
Mhm.
And it was connected to a TV. And I said, "What is this?" And he said, "It's a computer." And said, "What do you do with it?" He said, "I just use it to type out some balance sheets for the company that wants to do it." And they said, "Okay, I like this thing. Can I?" Because I knew typing. I had learned typing early on in my so one of my cousins used to teach typing in another state called Haryana, and so I was a good typer. So I said, I know how to type. Can I help you with this thing? Because I like this. And he said, "Yeah, of course. I'll do it for free." And he said, "In return, I'll play a couple of games extras. I won't have to pay for games." And then one thing led to another, and then figured out that this thing is actually called a computer. And then it had a COBOL programming language environment. It had basic programming environment, and that's really where computers kind of come into my life. And then once that, it was kind of like love at first sight, or whatever you want to call it. And that really sort of just blew up, and I had to do this thing. I have to figure out how to click this thing, or I have to work at it, or that sort of a scenario. So that bug sort of came in computing, came right around that when I created my first program, which literally was just writing a table of 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4. I just wrote a automatic program that typed it, and then I wrote a Fibonacci program, and those kind of things, and that sort of sold it to me as like, this is what I have to do for the rest of my life.
I love it. Oh my God, that's an awesome story. Thank you for sharing it. And so you end up going to, like you said, Indian Institute of Technology, which is, I think, one of the most, if not the most prestigious. You know better, but I heard about IIT when I started my career in technology recruiting, and somebody, an engineering leader, when he was looking at the resumes, he said, "If you see this, that means it's a smart
Yeah.
person. We want to talk to them." So how you said it was easy for you to get into
Yeah,
one
it
of
was.
the.
It wasn't easy. So there is this exam called joint entrance exam, and now it has taken a different flavor. It's given by hundreds of thousands of kids, and at our time, a couple of thousand get selected. So it wasn't easy. I prepared for it, but I actually prepared for another institute called Birla Institute of Technology, BITS, which is another very prestigious institute. It's another private college. Indian Institute of Technology are government-funded kind of colleges, they are definitely a lot more prestigious, or equally prestigious. I don't want to anger some Birla BITS fans. There's a lot of us, and I love BITS, and there. So I was supposed to go to BITS, but then I cracked the JEE exam, as they say it. But I was not that high ranked. So the way it works in India, or used to work, is if you, depending on your rank, you get to allocate it to an institute. Kanpur was one of the big ones, and but then you get your choice of discipline. So I ended up going into civil engineering. Had nothing. I didn't really know what was civil engineering about. That was the one that I elected, and that was the one they allowed me to. And that was based on a cousin's recommendation that you should go to IIT, not BITS, that sort of a thing. Again, I don't want to have any BITS IIT wars. They are both very good institutes. But so I ended up going there. And then IIT had this thing called, you could change your branch, but you had to have a perfect 10 GPA. And I didn't really get a perfect 10 GPA. So I got changed into chemical engineering. But then that same year or the year before, Kanpur started the minor and major program. So I ended up doing a minor technically in computer science. And but I was very interested in computer science. So I worked with my professors, and I pretty much did all the other courses or audited them. So, and in fact, there were some scenarios where my chemical engineering courses and computer science courses were head-to-head collision. And my chemical engineering professors were kind enough to let me kind of take exams outside the hours or something like that, and but really keep my computing sort of thing going. So yeah, it wasn't an easy journey, and perhaps that difficult journey of my life. And I worked in summer school, summertime. I worked as a lab in labs, and I worked on different projects in computing. And I believe that struggle that I had, because I wasn't handed computer science in IIT in a platter of sort, sort of made me also kind of maybe a little more, had that drive a little more, because I had to prove a point, and that sort of a thing. And so I used to stay in the computer center like nights and nights. There was times when I would not even sleep for like 3 days, just sitting in the computer center doing work. And so that helped me, in my opinion, quite a bit.
Yeah, because you already knew that you loved computers and you were really into it. But why couldn't you go for computer science right away?
Because my rank didn't allow me to go to computer science. So IIT, the way it worked at that time is, so we were 2,500 selected out of maybe a couple of 100,000. And depending on your rank, you get the preference to pick. And obviously the higher rankers got to pick computer science. So I didn't get to pick computer science. So that was the reason. It works differently. It works differently in US universities. US universities, you get admitted to a college of science or a college of engineering. In IIT, it is rank-based, or at least used to be rank-based. And that's how, you would pick your preference.
Okay, got it. And I have to ask you, a Catholic school in India, I guess it's something that I wouldn't have thought about.
It's actually very common. So, obviously with we have a colonial past, right? Okay. So the British left, I think one of probably the best gifts, or the British or the French or the other Anglo, the communities that came into India brought is, some discipline in schooling. And I think there's many Catholic schools that are known. My school was called St. Peter's College. It actually had a nice church, which was, religious optional. There was no reason to be religiously affiliated. I used to go to the mass because I loved it, but just for fun. But the Catholic school is actually very prevalent. In fact, the English. I mean, I'm not saying that the other schools are not good, right? They're obviously great, right? There is another schools system in there, but the Catholic school system used to be one of the finest school systems for middle school and high school kind of, and elementary school sort of area. And it's all over India. There are a lot of them. And so it's not uncommon for, users to do. In fact, that's kind of where, I'm actually like, even though English is my English is my first language. Hindi is not my first language because I studied in English all the time. Okay. And in fact, I used to have trouble with writing Hindi at some point of time because that's how we were grown up.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you for the explanation. And can you then connect the dots of how you went from India to US and kind of how your career took off?
Yeah, this is another interesting story. So, like I'm assuming a lot of us have known about Stack Overflow. And Stack Overflow is like a place where developers go to solve questions, right? If they have a question about a programming language and others. So in 90s, we didn't have Stack Overflow, meaning like Stack Overflow came way later. We had something called mailing list. So it was a list that you could subscribe yourself in, and you would get every single mail sent to you. So it was like mass mailing, like in any areas. So there was this list called Java users, and that was a mailing list for Java developers, right? And because we were early, like in the industry itself, about developing in Java, and I was one of the application developers, I started being very active on it, right? So I used to answer questions, I used to take problems, and do whatever I can, from a community perspective. So that particular mailing list, traffic was quite heavy and others. So one of my close friends, who I call him a brother, his name is Rajan. He was running a division in a company which was focusing on web development, and he actually scouted me on that mailing list. And he sent a recruiter after me and said, yeah, I need to get this guy. That's how I know after the fact. But, because I know him now well, he's like a family friend and a brother to me. He and I play golf a lot. But he found me, and then they ended up moving me to Hyderabad for a couple of months. I started working on some integration projects, and then I moved to Jersey in 97. So that's my kind of to India to New Jersey professional journey.
Wow. And you have the rare combination, or more rare. I mean, it is, you come across it less frequently when somebody has this deep technical expertise and still zest for staying so hands-on, and also the leadership aspect. How did that come about, or how has that happened?
Yeah, I think it's a very good observation. I mean, I'm actually glad that you sort of observed it in that scenario, and sort of the reason is I like to solve problems. I'm not a technology for technology's sake, right? Like I always say this, I'm not the first person to come with a new algorithm or a new technology, perhaps, but I will be the first one to try and solve a problem with it, if there is a problem to be solved, right? Like that is kind of like the way I look at it. So I want to, when I solve a problem, right? Like right now we are in the Gen AI revolution, I love, I mean, I'm on ChatGPT and all the other Anthropics and all the things of the world, like 24/7 almost, working on them. And I keep in touch as much as I can with those things. All the things are changing, kind of, the speed of change is like literally accelerating every day. I like to imagine solving, I like to be in scenarios where I'm solving specific business problems, right? Like how does a banker use that? Or how does a wealth manager benefit from an agent, or those kind of scenarios? So I think with that business perspective, in my head and solving real problems, like I always want to think about it from a user's perspective, right? What will the user do with this? How will the user's life be simplified? Or what kind of efficiency will they get, or what kind of new features would they get as part of this, and what kind of value they can provide to their end customers, if we are not talking about end customers. So users can be internal users, or end customers, or B2B users, or anybody that for matter. So I think that perspective has always helped me, right? And I sort of, because I'm solving a problem with a business context in mind, and then it is just piecing the things together, right? That's kind of like that, then it becomes straightforward.
But that also is what sets you apart, is that many times technologists want to be behind the scenes. They're not so keen to interact with the users, to interact with the business.
So, but I think we need all sorts of individuals, right? We need the hardcore geeks that are solving system level problems. We need the the business analysts that talk to the business day in day long and others. And it's not like one size fits all, right? I mean, we need and that's where diversity of thought is very important, right? And ideas is very important. So I think you need everybody to solve the problem, but my focus tends to be on the application side. I'm really more of an applications guy, and that's why I enjoy that sort of cycle. But there's a I'm finding the new GPT-5 is probably one of the most important things. Can OpenAI can solve the problem, right? Or and the new Anthropic version, or anything like that, or building out the new agent framework that comes like what we are doing is like very important. But for me, applying it is what is interesting. I am really after applying the technologies that everybody builds and then using that. So that is like cloud transformation is the big thing, and I kind of have worked in many kind of initiatives around it. But I always think about it, and it's like, how will it impact the user? So when I see kind of applications being transformed from internal data centers to a cloud transformation with a lift and shift kind of scenario, where you're not really doing any major changes, you're just moving from one data center to another data center. I mean, there are probably some benefits, but my approach would be to kind of spend some time and energy on doing that, because if you don't, chances are that it'll just get delayed and delayed, right? So, obviously you have to make decisions on multiple factors. Technology is just one of them. Cost is another one. Talent is another one. So, life is just a balancing act, right? In everything, and same thing with technology.
And how do you choose the problems? Because, I mean, first of all, there are so many problems, and you have also worked across so many disciplines like financial services. And many people think financial services, but even within financial services, there's retail, there's investment banking, there's the cards, business, individual. So, and then you've also worked in healthcare. How do you pick the challenge that you will focus on solving?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I would love to say that it was a choreographed plan, but I don't think that that's fair. Financial services chose me, almost as that area. When I got in consulting in New Jersey, with my company, I was integrating systems, and I happened to work with a lot of customers: Bank of America, American Express, World Bank, many of them, Merrill Lynch and others, right, in my consulting days. And so that expertise almost made me kind of ripe for having a conversation with the next financial services company, right? And then we started a startup, but my startup, another story, but we didn't really succeed because the first bubble happened. And but then I ended up joining JP Morgan Chase, and then went to American Express. So became a banking payments expert. In addition to like data and AI and integration and APIs and everything else. And then I always had this bug on you mentioned healthcare and life sciences. So when my father and my younger brother passed away several years ago, almost all of a sudden. And I always thought about it, and it's like I wasn't able to do much for them, and in the world of medicine. So I thought, okay, maybe I can contribute to the world of medicine a little bit, as a kind of an homage to them, or some sort of a redemption or something, personal kind of thing. So that's why I took on the challenge with IQVIA. And when Shri, as you and I both know him as, he called me and he said, let's solve some interesting problems together. And then COVID happened, and then I got to work on fabulous projects. We can talk about that. But so I think I found quite a bit of continuity between financial services and healthcare and life sciences, because they're both regulated industries. Financial services make a lot of investment on technology, right? Most of the companies in financial services don't really have a real product. Technology is the product, right? In that sense. And healthcare also, services companies are different. Obviously, some healthcare companies do have products, medicines and others, but they're very tech centric also. And transformation that has happened in financial services, in some areas, I saw it to be like way higher than transformation that is need to happen in healthcare. So my experience kind of helped, right? like I'll give you a kind of a simple comparison. We were doing risk management for customers on, who should be the person that we should provide credit to a customer, or which company should we provide, and kind of equate that to clinical monitoring and risk management in the clinical world. And they're very related, right? Recruiting customers or marketing to customers is the almost the same thing as patient recruiting from a technology perspective. So I saw a lot of parallels, and that's why those two industries sort of happened. It's not like so in some sense financial services chose me, and then healthcare and life sciences was just related. So I sort of dabbled on those two areas.
Yeah, totally. I mean, most people's like career journeys, it's like life opens the doors, you get experience somewhere, and it's kind of this alchemy. Like you said, it's not a perfectly pre-scripted plan. I'm gonna do this. This is how my
Right.
life's gonna look like. So
That's right.
I think that's very relatable to people. And so you have moved from American Express, JP Morgan, IQVIA. How do you know when it's time for you to move on? Like, how are you managing your career, and what would you share with others? When is the right time to move on?
Yeah, very good. No, it's actually a very good question. I attended a conference, Grace Hopper's conference, Women in Computing, and one of the, I think she used to be the CTO of Cisco or one of the largest companies. I may have gotten that wrong. Padma Shri Warrior. She mentioned it in one of the keynotes that you should leave a company when you are at its peak, when you are at its like your peak in your career, right? In that sense, or so it trickled a little thought. I'm not saying I'm following her in completeness, but I think it's a little bit of that, but more of not that there is no learning to be done, but what I want to accelerate my learning in another area. That's when I think I kind of do that, right? So I loved all my companies, meaning I still live by the blue box values of American Express. I loved IQVIA. I learned a lot about the clinical trials. Chase, I've been there 2 times, in my 2 innings across my life, and hopefully there is a third at some point of time. I mean, I love Chase as a company and the values that and in there, all my engagements have been lovely with all my sort of there, and I keep in touch with most of my teams, and sometimes I mentor them, sometimes I get mentored by them in those areas. But yeah, it's about accelerated learning. That's what actually have triggered me. I wouldn't say it's perfect. Like I don't think, like, some of my stints have been short, some of them have been long, so I don't think you can quite call it that way. But that's what I did. Like the reason I joined Salesforce was because I wanted to learn about more than I wanted to learn about investment management, like you said, wealth management, global markets, in insurance and other industries, and potentially play a role in life sciences and healthcare as well, because Salesforce obviously has its foots in other areas. So that sort of diversity attracted me, and that's what I'm really doing. I love talking to customers and solving problems at scale. In that sense, it almost feels like I can solve not one problem but many problems at once. Although there is a balancing act. Solving one problem to a depth is one sort of satisfaction, and solving money problems in a parallel is another sort of satisfaction. The other thing that I've always loved doing is working with startups and companies. So I kind of get involved in whether it is Amex Ventures or Salesforce Ventures in some capacity, like mentoring and talking with startups and seeing kind of how we can make 1+1 11, or at least more than 2. So that sort of an opportunity is really what gravitating. We'll see kind of where the rest of the life kind of leads me, but that's how I have thought about it, is like accelerate learning. And most of the time it is learning on business concepts. It's not learning about technology, because I think technology is almost like a horizontal. It applies across the board. There are some scenarios where you have more opportunities to do it. Like if I was working in retail, the applications of Gen AI is just faster in terms of doing it, because there's less regulatory issues to deal with, right? But in financial services and healthcare, there's a lot more regulatory issues. So you got to worry about that a lot, right? And
Yeah.
you want to make changes on somebody's credit in an incorrect way, if there is because of that challenges in a particular model or anything like that, right? So I think different things come into play, but I really try to accelerate my learning, because that has what driven me.
And have you almost felt like one of the drivers or the point at which you know you have to move is that you feel a little bit bored because you've learned kind of the customers, you've learned their problems, and to kind of
I mean,
satisfy that need.
no, I think I've never, I think the term bored is kind of very relative, but in that sense, there is obviously some days where you feel kind of down because, your idea was turned down or something happened, right? That sort of a scenario. But that happens in every kind of large company. Every area in that sense is a factor of that. But I think it's because you can always figure out what to do, right? Like, for example, in Chase, I had a 150-person team that I was managing, and that was the largest team in my career that I managed. That had its own challenges. I was interviewing a lot of candidates and others. In Salesforce, I'm an IC, so I don't have a team reporting to me. That is its own kind of interesting. I've always said this. I kind of work in an influence without authority kind of mode most of the time, and I cut across orgs very quickly. In fact, if I don't ruffle some feathers, I haven't done my job right. So in that sense, but so yeah, it has been. It's not about bored. I think you figure out what you want to do. If the job is kind of quote unquote boring, you will make the job more interesting because you will come up with a new idea, you will come up with a patent application, or you will come up with a new concept and get funding for it, or pitch it to the leaders, and or if you don't find any of that, you find I love mentoring. I like that is, in my opinion, the second half of my career.
Mhm.
Probably whatever is left is I really enjoy mentoring. Young females particularly because I think there is a little bit of a disbalance in computing, at least from a leadership and areas perspective. I think I want to showcase like probably some opportunities or give some pathways. I think
Yeah,
like what they say, right? Teachers and schools and mentors can open doors for you, but you still have to walk through them, right?
yes.
So that sort of feeling is what I think is useful. So I don't think like if there's a couple of days when I kind of have a couple of hours left, I just give one of my mentees a call and say, yeah, you wanted to chat about this, let's chat. So that always drives me, again.
So with that, also, do you enjoy leadership roles then more than individual
Yeah,
contributor?
I mean,
Or
well, I think, see, leadership, individual contributor, they're kind of like tags that sort of sometimes are meaningless in some sense. All that means is I don't have a person reporting to me directly versus non-reporting to me. I
yeah,
mean,
you
I
don't
think
have
as
to
a
do,
leader,
yeah.
yeah, you just don't have to write their year-end performance review or
Yeah.
appraisals, which are bullshit anyway in most
And they
scenarios,
might not
right?
listen to you as well
They
as
don't
you.
matter. They don't matter. They are. I think like the writing up a performance appraisal. I'm not a big fan of those, right? In that sense. But anyway, let's talk about that. But what I was saying is, in that sense, it's a very thought. It's what you think about it, right? But I think a leader is somebody that sort of grooms individuals or mentors individuals. That is more important. Is leading is more important, right? Having reporting relationships is interesting, and I think that has its own benefits. Sometimes has its cons because of the structure that comes with it and other things, but that is okay, right? But I think leading is what is important. It's not about whether you have 100 people reporting to you or no people reporting to you.
Yeah, because I think you were leading when you had those kids in school already coming to you and saying, "Hey,
That's
Hitesh,
right.
can you help me
That's right.
with my
Yeah, that's
health?"
right. And even if, let's say, even if you're not mentoring anybody in your company, you know you are leading customers, you are leading thought processes with partners, you're leading with industry, you're doing all sorts of things. So I think leading means different to different people,
Yeah.
right? I think for me it's all about growth of an individual or an idea or of a company or a concept. That's what leading is to me about. Like that's what leading embodies me to me.
Yeah, totally. And so you shared about a couple of inflection points, especially at that shop in India, right? Where you started working with that computer and how you got connected with it. Have there been, or what have been other inflection points that you look back that really have shaped you or shaped your career direction?
Very good question. So I think I'll maybe take another example. When the merger of JP Morgan Chase and Bank One happened in my career, it's an interesting story. I We started a startup that was trying to do the world of business activity monitoring, or you could connect to like Splunk like work, right, or companies like Splunk. But obviously Splunk does a lot more than what we did, but we did a different problem. Like we wanted to connect like integrations across the systems and kind of connect order to cash and in a manufacturing cycle. So we started a startup. It didn't really get funded because that was the first bubble happen. That and then I took a and that was an interesting experience. Like you said, failure teaches you a lot of things, and that also taught me, some experiences. But right after that, I took a corporate role. My first corporate role with JP Morgan Chase. When I joined JP Morgan Chase, and we merged with Bank One, there was pretty much large merger means a lot of disruptions to people and technology and others. During that time, I had just before that merger, I had built a diagram, like a pretty comprehensive diagram of 2 feet by 4 feet, if you may, that described how Chase.com works. At all the various businesses like banking, cards, auto finance, home finance, and others per se. My CIO saw it, and he basically really liked it, and he used to have this picture in his room. And then when the merger happened, I got tasked with building out something similar for the merged organization, and sort of compare and contrast and see which ones to use. And that sort of lesson taught me, and that was the reason why I got into the whole merger integration project. I had not done any M&A in my past, right? I had no experience doing that, or no business being doing that either. But because of that visual articulation, right, I got into that task force and really kind of integrate the two companies together. And I worked on many projects after that in Chase, in my first kind of innings with Chase. And that was very interesting. And I kind of really learned from that end of the day, it's all about communication, right? Because as technologists, we are either writing code, or we are reviewing code, or we are influencing things, right? We're influencing what to build, we're influencing what to integrate, what not to do, what are the things, what are the guardrails, and all sorts of things associated with it. Influencing is a key component of it, and especially with authority, you have to really communicate. And I'm no Obama, right? I'm not a good orator or anything like that. But what I found to be interesting is visual artifacts are very, very important in sharing ideas with businesses, and that sort of experience taught me a lot. And later in my American Express career, one of my senior leaders, his name is Miles, he actually used the term high level detail. It's like an oxymoron, right? It's high level and detailed at the same time. So the idea is that these visuals or these artifacts are high level in such a way that the CEO can understand it, but detailed in a way that the CTO can make sense out of it, or it is useful. It's not architecture, right? It's detailed enough to make decisions and use it for decision making. And I think that experience taught me a lot in how to communicate right. And I think I've had like really good time working with like all sorts of people in life, right? HR, board members. Like I presented to the board when the American Express split with or the spin-off of business travel happened. I really presented like how business travel works in a visual metaphor. And I literally went to the whiteboard and started drawing how it works all together. And that was very interesting. And those visual ideas, I think, saying ideas in a visual way, is really interesting. And I think that lesson sort of taught me a lot of things about what to do in communications, and then that what is important in as a communicator. Because if you can communicate your ideas, a lot of ideas don't mean anything. So I actually worked with legal teams, and when I got involved in patent reviews and patent acquisitions and patent sales And I really, like, a lot of people say it's hard to deal with lawyers, and I love lawyers because they once I got the visual sort of down, they actually became close friends, and they used to use my the visual to say, oh, this is what we are talking about, this is the domain that you're talking about, and that sort of stuff. And same thing, like when I came to IQVIA, I had to draw a diagram of how clinical trial works because I had no clue how it works. So one of the first thing that I did was to work with all my experts in the team to really build out a visual of how does a clinical trial operates end to end. And I don't think I got it complete because it's just a complex world, but it got to some level of completeness, and then we built on top of it. So that's another kind of an area.
So have you always kind of noticed that that's how you operate, that you're able to break down kind of that structure, right? Outline that structure, and like you said, even make it more simple depending on the audience, right? And that has been a key, something that
Yeah.
has been a part of you and the way your mind works, the way you work, like since early on.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like individuals like Miles and Dan from Chase helped me kind of, finesse that idea a little better, right? Because they would give me a lot of feedback and say, like I started building structures where, you had like, again, it sounds simple, but it's actually fairly involved. And in terms of doing it, like I used to build a picture that is a high level picture, very high level picture that maybe has 25 boxes. But then I would almost like say, okay, peel the onion, you get another level of detail. Peel the onion and you get how many people working on that problem. Peel the onion and you get how many Scrum teams are doing that work. Peel the onion and you get where is this infrastructure deployed. And peel the onion and you get other sort of things. So you can build up on those experiences. And I think that made it just an easier way to communicate. I'm still a very whiteboard driven customer, even to or individual. Even today, when I meet with customers, I think I enjoy and they enjoy the interaction where I understand their platforms, what they have invested in today in a whiteboard kind of session, and then figure out where some of our technology platforms kind of fit in with their ecosystems or integrate with it, because that's really what is important to them, because they want to leverage their existing investments and build on top of it versus in some scenarios they want to replace some technologies, but that's also an important thing to understand. But that visual always helps us connect the dots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. How do you hire people? So you've been in positions, you've interviewed and built teams and hired many people. What do you look for? What's most important to you?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I look for individuals that have, a combination of depth and breadth, right? Like I like people that have a depth in a particular domain, in a particular technology, and they're deep in that area. And a breadth is as in they worked in a couple of different areas. They're not just focused on one area, because I tend to hire architects, senior leaders, technologists, and I think it's important to get that mix, or at least that drive to learn that mix. If in that scenario, I always say a good technologist is somebody that is a jack of several trades, master of some. Right. So it's not master of none; it's master of some, or at least one. In that scenario. So I think that attribute helps me a lot in communications, and I look for communicators also, especially if you are talking about influencers. We want to understand how they can influence. One thing I want to just stress out is like communication doesn't mean he or she is a polished individual. That doesn't really, in my opinion, is a factor. In my opinion, that's always a good thing. Polished individuals tend to communicate easier, but I think raw communicators are even more powerful because you have to be authentic, right? I mean, I think you just can't you just can't make stuff up, right? So I actually always like individuals that are very authentic on what they are doing. Like if asking about a technology platform, and I used to ask people to write code, but nowadays I say, okay, can you share me some code that you have written? And then I want to kind of